This is our alumni panel. We hold it once every semester. We ask some of our alumni to come in and talk about what they do and the kinds of experiences they've had and the kinds of things they thought did them some good and maybe did them some not so good while they were here at St. Thomas. And we hope it's a benefit to you. Usually they have some pretty interesting things to say. Now, let me introduce the panelists here. First, we have Gabe Skelly. He's the your own company, right? Yeah, Skelly Video Productions. Graduated in 2004, and here we have Anna Kudak. Graduated in 2005, and she has a PhD in communications, and is serving as an adjunct now for us in teaching some of the courses that Carol Breeze taught before she left us this year. Briggs LaSavage graduated in 2014 and was one of our stalwarts at Tommy Media, and she is now at CBS 3 in Duluth, Minnesota as a morning co-anchor and producer. Elena Nugel graduated last spring and was one of our directors of Tommy Media and one of our real hardworking reporters, and she now works for Thomson Reuters. I'm sure she might have some, she and Claire here will have some interesting things to say about internships that they've had. Jacqueline Destache, was that? Okay, well, shame on me. I should have asked before we got in here. But she graduated in 2017 and is now a judicial law clerk for the Honorable Edward S. Wilson. And I'm sorry, law graduation in 2017 and undergrad in 2014. And one of the many people we've had go into law school out of our program. And then Claire Rosset, now working at Haworth Media. She graduated last spring, and she's the assistant digital ad operations at Haworth. So welcome, and what we're going to do is just have them talk a little bit, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. We have some microphones set up here. So I guess my first question for you would be, describe a little bit about your career path and how you got where you are. We'll start with Anna here again. The question is, describe your career path since you graduated from our communication program here.
Okay, hello. My career path after St. Thomas was a master's degree from North Dakota State University, where I followed Dr. Breese's mentor, Judy, and she was my advisor there. And then I moved on to the University of Kentucky for my PhD. Ever since then, I've been meandering all over to different schools, adjuncting when people need me, and really enjoying that. I've also written several books, and I enjoy working with students and pursuing new knowledge.
So I graduated from undergrad in 2014 and went right into the St. Thomas Law School that following fall. And I just recently graduated in May. So I guess I don't really have that much of a career path to talk about yet. But I did just pass the bar exam on Monday, so that was exciting. And I'm currently working as a judicial law clerk for a judge in Ramsey County.
Gabe Skelly. I've done a lot of things since I graduated St. Thomas as an 04 grad. I guess what I do is also what I did before I was here. I've got a lot of family history in video production. My grandpa was one of the founders of KTCA, which is Channel 2 in the Twin Cities. After that, he had a long career in the St. Paul Public Schools, where he was their director of communication. My uncle is now their director of communication. My mom went to the University of Minnesota for communication. I'm here. And then I've got a 15-year-old out of 4 kids. My oldest is 15, who is got her own, is a video production person. So I guess it goes a long history of video production. What I did at St. Thomas and right afterwards, a lot of kind of figuring out what I want to do as far as my career, a lot of different business and sales and advertising type jobs. And I've always done video production as kind of a side thing. And then when I've not had other things I'm doing, I fall into it as a full-time thing. So, and I do a lot of different traditional and non-traditional media with video. So.
All right. I graduated in 2014. After that, I went to go work for the ABC affiliate in Duluth. I spent a year reporting there and doing some anchoring and producing. And then I kind of took a little windy path and I spent some time doing public relations for a congressman. That was fun. But then I realized I actually wanted to go back to TV. So now I do that again. And I work as a morning anchor and producer and reporter in Duluth for the NBC and CBS station this time.
Hi, I graduated in May, so my career path is not very long yet. But I worked at the Star Tribune for their internship program over the summer, so I was a copy editing intern there, working from 3 to midnight. And then I just started, well, just like 6 weeks ago, started a job at Thomson Reuters as a desk editor / copy editor. So that's where I came from just now. And I have normal hours, so that's exciting.
So I also just graduated in May, and what I did over the summer was I stuck with Tommy Communications, which was or is a new on-campus communications agency that I helped start last spring. So I stuck with them and worked on some projects while I also worked actually at the law school in downtown Minneapolis with a student worker job that I'd had for a couple years. And so while I was doing those, I also was just kind of networking a bunch. And I just recently started my job at Hayworth. So that's kind of how I got there.
As usual, we have a nice mix of people who've been out for a while and people who have various career paths. I guess, and any one of you can just step in here and answer. What is the thing that you've found most useful that you did while you were at St. Thomas that's helped you in what you're doing, getting where you are now or in the job you're doing now?
I'm sure we probably have the same answer. Tommy Media, for sure. That was such a huge difference maker in the experience that I got before going into my first job. Had I not done Tommy Media and gotten experience shooting video, writing, and working with all the professors who have had experience working for different news organizations and outlets across the country, really, I think I would have been really ill-prepared for my first job. So I think Tommy Media definitely gives you that hands-on experience that a lot of managers are really looking for.
Plus, it's really fun. And for me, I would say the same. Tommy Media was great because that's where I basically honed writing skills and editing skills and having fun with people who like words, skills. And also, Amodi and Vandy wrote my recommendations for the Star Tribune internship, which I ended up getting. So thank you both. But yeah, I mean, it's a great way to meet people who are really, really good in the field as far as professors go, and then your fellow classmates who will be really good in the field.
Similarly, I would say that my on-campus jobs are super helpful. So I initially thought that I wanted to go to law school, and then I started working there and just kind of realized that that wasn't a good fit for me. And so then I got pretty lucky last year with Tommy Communications. It's also called TomComs, if you hear that. It's the same thing. And I got a lot of experience with them with working with real clients on all sorts of different projects. I learned skills as far as putting together ad campaigns, just how to talk to clients, how to deal with them, how to deal with people when things come up, because things always come up all the time. And then just like things like writing proposals and just a bunch of the terminology, I feel like that's given me a leg up kind of now. And then I've leveraged my network too with the connections that I made through that. So that was also really helpful.
Gabe, you had kind of a puzzled look on your face when I asked this question. It's hard to remember that far back?
No, so everybody's talking about Tommy Media. I don't think there was Tommy Media when I was here. So I would say I would go back to my on-campus jobs where I worked for the TV studio. Maybe that's kind of what Tommy Media is now. I worked for the TV studio to go and shoot football games and do editing and run the TV studio and run some of these rooms. And then I also had in 2000, I think 3 or 2004, they started a audio program where they broadcast. At that point, it was a closed circuit cable station, but it was Tommy Radiocom was the thing that Julie Friedline brought in with some other people, and so we got to use Pro Tools and a lot of the current kind of cutting edge industry tools to make our own audio programs. And so that combination with going and shooting, really learning the tools that were in the industry, that was huge for me, going out and doing video production and audio production, getting into podcasting kind of in the heydays of it just starting out. So those were big. That's why I was like, oh, Tommy Media. We didn't really have that when I was here, but
We had the Aquin at that time.
we did. Yeah, yep. We had in paper form, so it was actually
Yeah, the paper form, and so it's hard to do video on paper. So that's one of the reasons we switched to Tommy Media. Now, one of the things that you said, I think is true today, that we have several students that I know of who work for they work for the studio down there, or they work for Brad Knutson. They work with Brad Knutson, who's the videographer, ITS group. And I guess one thing I've always advised, I might just kind of step in here, is that if you're looking for a job on campus, try to find something that relates to what you're doing. It's nice to be a waiter or somebody who gives tours and walks backwards, but if you can find a job that relates to what you're doing, there's plenty of those on campus. We had students do design work for university relations, for example, and that helped them build a portfolio, and it gave them some experience there. But I'm interested in hearing how Jackie got to law school and what helped you and here at St. Thomas.
So I actually initially came to St. Thomas wanting to do broadcast journalism. However, I did try Tommy Media and it wasn't for me. So a little tip there is like try everything, because not only you might find out that it's for you, but it might also direct you where you're actually supposed to be if you don't like it. So I then I wanted to stay in the communications major. I really liked it. Then I started thinking about law school, and there's a lot of really great classes in the major that I think actually really helped prepare me for law school. So one of the key takeaways I would say is all the public speaking that I had to do in all of my communication classes really helped so much. I'm interested in doing like trial advocacy, so being in the courtroom and talking on the record in front of people every day. And all of the internships and externships I had in law school required me to do that. And so in almost all of the classes I took, we were forced to talk in front of the class numerous times. And not only that, but we were taught how to actually make a succinct argument. And I think that was really important too, and how to kind of craft your argument, because it is an art as well. And that has definitely helped me.
Was there a particular course that when you talk about those things that you think really kind of hit home for you?
So I know we had to take a public speaking course when I was here. That was a requirement. So that was helpful in just teaching you how to talk in front of people. I also took, I think it was called Argumentation and Advocacy with Dr. Armada, and I took Persuasion with Dr. Sauter. So those are a lot of the main courses where we were up in front of people making arguments and having to think on our feet, but also present too.
I think the most helpful thing that I did was establish relationships with professors. I really enjoyed having people who cared about me and really mentored me. I think that that's something that I think students undervalue, the relationships that they can have with their professors and how a professor can advocate for you and help guide you in the right direction. And I was really, really fortunate to have many professors care, and I hope you do the same.
We could open up for a few questions. If there's something you'd like to ask, step up to the microphone here and ask your question. I see everybody's eager to do so. Here comes somebody.
Is there anything that you didn't do at St. Thomas that you wish you did have done? Or anything that you wish you would have done to help prepare
lots of things I wish I wouldn't have done and have done. um, yeah, I wish that I would have branched out a little bit and taken more classes that just seemed interesting to me too. Rather than being so focused on what I wanted to do with my life, which is also good, but I wish I had just taken some interesting classes for fun that maybe would have led me uh, just rounded out my education.
Yeah, on that note, I wish I would have maybe thought about my minor a little more. I did Spanish, which was great. Not super relevant in Duluth, but I don't know. I wish I would have considered something like political science maybe and just thought about how that could help me in reporting maybe a little bit more, just kind of understanding different subject matters a little deeper, I would say maybe.
You know, I was at a, a breakfast last week, I guess it was, when we had the broadcast journalist series here, and April Ryan, a White House correspondent, talking to us and saying how she wished she would have majored in international studies. And I think that you have plenty of room in a degree program here to get into something like that, but it's hard to predict, you know, what's going to interest you. If you can figure out some other interest like that where you get sort of a concentration, I think it really helps down the road as well. Were you going to say, Alina, or?
So I don't know when this started, but if I had known about it sooner, I would have signed up for the Student Alumni Mentor Program sooner. And if you haven't heard about that, what that does is based on your interests, it matches you with an alum who kind of becomes like your mentor. And they're your kind of go-to person that you can, ask questions about. You can learn about what they do. If they have anyone else that you think that, or that they think you should talk to, kind of things like that to help you throughout school as you're looking for a job. The two that I've had were super helpful. So,
Who did you have for mentors?
one was Caitlin Peterson. So she graduated from COJO, I think in 2015, and she does public relations at Best Buy. So she was really helpful. And then another one I had is named Nansha, and she actually, I think, was a finance major. And so I got partnered with her because that was after I had this like mini crisis where I discovered that I didn't want to go to law school. So I was like, nonprofits maybe. And she worked at a nonprofit. So, but she was also really helpful too, and just kind of because everybody goes through looking for a job, getting that first job. So there's a lot of overlap that she was still able to help me with and provide some insight on.
Elena, what do you wish you would have done more of or less of?
I would probably echo the taking classes that look really interesting, because I don't know who was saying that. They took persuasion and all. I didn't necessarily have room for those things, but I probably could have hammered them in somewhere. And I mean, you can think about those classes as just for fun, but also if a class like persuasion or rhetoric isn't really just for fun, it's useful in your own life and then also useful for understanding how the world works. So think about that too.
Was anybody else have something that you wish you would have done? Yeah, pass the microphone.
I kind of second what they said on the end is the student alumni mentorship program. I don't think it was quite as big when I was a student here, but I've been a mentor for that for I think 8 years, maybe going on 9 years now. It's really easy to do, and I usually always have like a finance or accounting person teamed up with me because it seems like COJO might be a little light on people signing up. If you don't want to do a full year program, try the Take a Tommy to Lunch, where you essentially go out with an alumni and they buy you lunch and you talk about your career and life aspirations. Just kind of kick around ideas and share networking. The other one would be internships. Do internships. Really, I was in the position where I had a pretty well-paying job off campus that I worked a lot of the time while I was still on campus. But take the opportunity to do even unpaid internships if you can afford to do it. Go find something really cool where there's maybe a St. Thomas connection, and do something that is really, really something you think you might want to do or not, and just jump into it and give it a try, because those really help when you get out into the career field, saying that you did this thing or this thing, and even if you don't make money now, it's going to be more important down the road.
I only studied abroad for a J term, and I wish that I had studied abroad every term. I think that it's really it just continues to serve you in your life to learn about other cultures and other places, and it serves your career as well. And so don't think about only the money because the loans will be there no matter what. And so I encourage you to travel.
We have several of you have done study abroad. I know Elena has. You've done. Where'd you go?
Theology class, and then I went to South Africa for the communications class with Dr. Sauter,
Oh yeah.
and those are both over J term.
And Riggs, you want to?
I did the London J term with Dr. Nugent. Or was it? No, it wasn't. I don't even remember who I went with.
Wendy and
No, yeah, Dr. Wyatt and Connery. Yeah, that's right. That was
And-
fun.
and Elena's been all around the world, so
Yeah, I did the Theology 101 program in Rome for freshmen, which was fantastic. And then I studied abroad for a whole semester in Siena, Italy, because I was an Italian minor. So language minors aren't always useless, breaks. And then this past January, I went to Athens for a J term pretty much randomly, and it was great.
what's now that you've I mean, some of you have been out of school for a while, and you probably all have had something that is. Now, if I asked this question already, forgive me because thoughts go in one ear, not the other with me. But has anything sort of shocked you or surprised you that as you were? Did I already ask that question? No. Okay, good. Has anything like that surprised you or shocked you about that maybe you didn't expect when you got out there in the job world? I see Elena nodding her head, so maybe she can go.
Yeah, I don't know if this may be the right answer to give at an alumni panel, but I feel like college was a lot more work than my job currently is. A lot more work. And I mean, part of it is how you push yourself in school and what classes you take and how busy your work schedule is and all of that. But I'm constantly asking for more work because I'm like, hello, I'm done. Please give me something to do. I mean, of course, I started 6 weeks ago, so I'm still like on crutches, basically. But yeah, I would say I was surprised that it wasn't like, me being smashed into the wall with editing work.
That's I figure that a lot from students. You don't realize that you're pretty much never off duty when you're in school, but when you get into a job, and it can be a very busy job, but it might be 8 hours a day, and you go home and what the heck? Now you're no homework, right?
Yeah, like, what the heck do you do with your time?
Yeah,
Which
so
is
there
me
you
right
go.
now.
What about you, Briggs? Anything in the world of television really shock you, or get the microphone there?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still thinking about my answer, kind of. I guess my my gut reaction is that working at a TV station, there's you don't quite realize just how much of like a tenacity you really have to have, even in like a small place like Duluth. It's still competitive when you're out there with other stations trying to get the same story. Just how sad it can be too, because like all the time we're talking about like, I mean, take the Las Vegas shooting just earlier last week, whenever that was. That was on obviously a much bigger scale, but you're talking about things like that you have these like emotional connections to, and you have to kind of put them aside. You don't quite realize just maybe how hard that can be sometimes. But and then also, viewers can be kind of mean. They send you some mean emails sometimes, so you don't necessarily get too prepared for that until you get your first view, and then you just kind of are like, oh, okay. But those are my first reactions. But I'm sure I could think of a better answer.
I'm interested in hearing what Gabe has to say about being an entrepreneur in the communications business. Is there something there that's maybe you're constantly surprised by, or?
I would just say that the ability you can just keep making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, and that a lot of times you probably hear it in school, but you learn a lot more from the mistakes you make than a lot of times the victories you have. And as starting my own business, there's a lot of kind of leaps and jerks. For me, I get customers and I lose customers, and then I get more customers, and it seems like you're forever building your own personal brand. And that's a huge thing now. So you guys, I would suggest to everybody that hasn't graduated, watch your personal brand, watch your social media, be careful with some of the things you put out there. There are actually sites that will monitor you. There are HR tools you can use that they'll pick out every single keyword that you have publicly out there in every social media platform.
Laundry? They launder you, would you say?
They do. The big companies do to see what you're about. So interesting things. But yeah, just don't ever be scared to make mistakes. And just keep moving forward and just keep trying hard, because that's how you're going to be successful.
Of course, I think college is a place where you make your mistakes too, where the stakes are a lot lower. We mentioned Tommy Media and Tommy Communication, where you're doing kind of the real thing, but the stakes are lower. You're not you're insulated a little bit. That maybe a layer of insulation you don't have in the real world. But when you get out there, there's no insulation. It's pretty much you against, like you say, people can be mean or customers can leave. They can be hard to deal with. We learned that in TomCom, where how hard customers can be to deal with. And I'm sure if you talk to Craig Bryan or somebody else in the advertising business, you just got a small taste of it. What about Jane?
So I guess going through law school, the most surprising thing was how consuming it was. I think grad school proved to be a lot harder than undergrad, which obviously it probably should be. But I think the hugest thing to me was that all you're doing is a lot of stuff related to the law. Whereas in undergrad, I had a very diversified experience. I was an athlete, I worked, I was double major, you're in different clubs. I was able to experience a lot of different things, whereas everything I did for the past 3 years was somehow related to something legal, like every club you're in or everything you're doing. But also, it's amazing how fast you can learn. Just looking back, like your 1L year is horrible, but then you look back and you're like, wow, it used to take me 2 hours to read a case, and now I can like skim it and still get the same answer. So it's amazing how fast you do actually learn. And I think going forward in internships and externships, it's just the learning curve is always surprising, but then it's also amazing that you can figure it out and you get it eventually.
Did you find it easier to deal with just one subject, one thing? I mean, it's one discipline, let's put it that way.
That was actually probably one of the hardest things for me, just because I was so used to doing so many different things that I felt like I was missing a part of me at first. But then as you go through law school, you get to get involved in more things, and so you kind of get to branch out a little bit more. But that was difficult for me, actually.
Was that your experience in graduate school?
I loved graduate school. It was a really, still my favorite time because, like you said, it was still hard. It was harder. And yet I loved just digging into what I loved. And just really being around people who were as passionate and excited about that topic that I was and supported. That's where I made actually closer friends in graduate school than I did even in undergrad, which I didn't think it was possible. And so I encourage anybody who's thinking about it, go for it.
I didn't see you over there, sorry.
No worries. I guess my question would pertain mostly to you because you work in broadcasting. So I'm an aspiring news anchor, and I would really like to hear, is there anything that I can do as an undergraduate, any classes I can take, groups I can join, internships I can do? I've heard the field is very competitive, but really anything that I could do to help set me up to try and obtain a job in that field.
Yeah, I think probably broken record, Tommy Media is great. Also, I would try to probably get an internship in a small market and then also a large market. So maybe like somewhere like Duluth, Rochester, something like that. And then also maybe then try to make your way into a Twin Cities station as well, so you can get kind of a wide look at how things work in a lot of different newsrooms. I think that's a really good thing or a big thing that news directors look at. Just make sure you have a lot of, let's see, like work examples, like stories that you do maybe for Tommy Media or something like that. I think those are huge. Let's see. Just watch a lot of news. That helped me, I think, too. Watch all the channels. Don't just watch like one affiliate, so you can kind of understand just the way things work, and then be open to experiencing a lot of different things in a newsroom too. I originally was like just set on reporting, and that's what I wanted to do, and that's like was going to be it. But then now in this new role I produce the morning show as well, and so it's not something that I was like mentally thinking that I wanted to do, but something that I found out I love. So the more you can kind of get a hand in different things in your newsrooms, I think that would be probably the best. Yeah.
I think in the game of football they call it get the reps.
Yeah.
We
I
have,
don't watch football, so I don't know
Well,
what to relate to on that note.
what that means is in practice, you go through it over and over again, and that's something I think that we talk about these things in general, internships and Tommy Media and so forth, but what we're really talking about is practice, and not only just practice. It's when we heard this thing about 10,000. It takes 10,000 hours to become virtuoso at something. But what the untold part about it is that that really has to be what we call directed practice, where you're being self-critical. And I think some of you could address that, how important self-criticism is, and being hard on yourself, and looking at yourself in sort of an honest fashion. Maybe you could talk about that for a minute in some of the jobs you're doing.
So as a law student, you get a lot of opportunities to actually go and be in the courtroom and represent clients, and you realize that you really don't know what you're doing. So you really do have to look to the other attorneys that are supervising you, and they give great feedback. Everyone I've ever worked for, they kind of want to help young students, and so they're more than willing to give you feedback. And I think it's just really important to take that feedback for what it is. And obviously, at the same time, you are supposed to stay true to yourself too. So you can't necessarily like change who you are when you're lawyering. But it is always important to take advice from everyone because they've been doing it way longer than you, and they have lots of great ideas. Even just observing people, I think you learn a lot about yourself and what you're lacking or what you could be doing, and I think that will only make you better.
How does a communication entrepreneur get that sort of critical feedback or whatever you need there?
So I guess just really groups of my peers. There's a couple people that do things like I do for bigger corporations. I try to leverage the newest technologies in video production. So I do a lot of live streaming and a lot of 3D stuff, AR, VR, and a lot of social media, paid and gained media. And I really do a lot online, talking to friends that do the same kind of stuff. So those peer groups are really important, whatever you do, especially across industries. So I'll do meetups with people, and we'll just go out for coffee, and we'll talk about things that we're doing, things that I like that they're doing. I was actually at a company called MentorMate in the Twin Cities last night. It's about a 500-person software design company, and one of the guys there that runs their video production crew for across their channels, we were just talking about the changes in essentially live feeding video streaming. And how far that's come, and just comparing the tools and technology and how we do it and how we shoot and those kind of things. Really just having a peer group in what you do.
So these are professional organizations or just informal groups that you are part of?
Either or. So there are some professional organizations, and there's some that are where we create a group of people that on Facebook or somewhere that we talk about what's going on in the industry and those kind of things.
I bet everybody would agree that networking is important once you get out and building those sort of relationships. What networks, what are some of the ways you network with in your professions? I know some of you are just out of school, so you haven't much chance at it, but you probably already are thinking about that. How do you go about that, building those networks?
So something that I've done that's been really helpful so far is professors. So talking to my different professors, because I know a bunch of different people. And then people even from the law school had helped me out around the office. My student alumni mentor, that mentor, they were helpful. My parents even sometimes just, like, hey, do you know anyone anyone who does
Your
marketing.
parents, I don't know if anybody wants to hear that part of it. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but yeah, and then one of the best pieces of advice that I got actually from a professor was that every time you network with someone, ask them, is there anyone else you think that I should talk to? Because then they can help you get in touch with someone else. Then if you have a LinkedIn, connect with them on that. And if you don't have a LinkedIn, get one, because that's also really helpful.
I would add the journalism world is pretty small. So for me, I met some people at my summer internship who know the people that I work with now. And also just that can also be a bad thing where if you totally screw up and are a terrible worker, like everybody will know about it. But of course, none of you are going to be terrible workers. So that's helpful though, because I had one job and then kind of propelled me into a different job just by knowing the people at the first one. So that's my tip / warning.
I think journalism is a particularly small world, where if you are in it for a number of years, pretty soon you're like one degree of separation from everybody else in the business. You may not know it sometimes, but you are, and I'm guessing that the law profession is a fairly small world, and I know that academic pursuits like communication that can, even though the convention, like go to a convention and there's 2,000 people there, but that's pretty much it. It's like a small town that you're a member in. Have they started you networking in your law clerking? How are you going about that? What's that like?
So I would say use the St. Thomas network that you have. It's incredible, the undergrad as well as any of the grad programs. So I have gotten a mentor every single year at the law school that we're required to have. And actually, the judge that I'm working for was my mentor my last year, and then he hired me. So the network that the school provides you is wonderful, and take advantage of it. I feel like there's always networking events that the school puts on. They're willing to give you mentors. Your professors know a lot of people in whatever field you're going into. I think adjunct professors that have been out in the field have a lot of connections that are very, very current. And also, though, I understand I'm not a fan of networking, so I view that if you get an internship or an externship or something, that's networking too, because you're making a lot of relationships there, and those are the people that can write you letters of recommendations, point you in another direction. So there's just lots of ways. Just take advantage of everything that St. Thomas offers, and then go out and just meet as many people as you can.
I guess what you're saying is that the networking starts here, and we have a number of freshmen, first-year students out here, and it starts right now for you too, with the person sitting next to you in class, and you'll find, I think, that a lot of them will become friends and people you can rely on in the future. We have a question over here.
Yeah, I'm a senior. I'm a music business major, but I'm a COJO minor. And the networking thing is stuff I've heard for 4 years and then some, because I know it's important. But what kind of things did you do to cultivate relationships once you've built them? I mean, it's one thing to establish a relationship with someone and get to know them and say, I'd be interested in working for you or seeing if we can find something that I could do. But what makes that next step where you actually build it into a possible career or internship or something like that?
So something that I would do, because I kind of struggled with that too, like you meet with them, you have coffee, and then you're like, okay, now what? So a lot of times people, they get that you might just meet them this one time and that might be it. And they're still going to be, they're going to help you, because unless if they're a terrible person, they're going to want to help you. But then if there are a few that, maybe they do something that interests you a lot, or they work at a place that you'd really like to work at, just if you see anything in the news about, maybe that company, just, send them a little, hey, I saw this. You could send them something around the holidays if you know when their birthday is, just saying, a little something here or there, just to say, kind of that you're thinking about them. If you ever have any questions, always ask them. Resume advice, just things like that. If you're really struggling, if you look on the internet, I'm sure people have 1,000 ideas, even more. So
I think if I could underscore that, this idea of thoughtfulness, is always a great, I mean, it's, you're going here to school and you get all these academic subjects, but maybe the most important thing you can do is learn how to treat others as you'd want to be treated yourself, and be thoughtful, and because then they get something out of it too. If a relationship's all one way, that's not going to last. But if they feel like they're getting something out of it, it may just be a kind word or friendship or something like that.
Another thing too is I don't think it always has to be like the boss or the manager that you connect with. It can also be just like an employee at the company. Like for example, I worked at the station I was at, and then I was friends with a handful of other Tommies who ended up getting jobs there too, and it just worked out really well because my boss came to me, knew I was from St. Thomas, and was like, "Hey, like what can you say about these people? Have you worked with them?" And so those kind of connections too doesn't always have to be super high up on the ladder.
I would say with St. Thomas, the whole motto here is do good for the common good, and there's no greater equalizer than volunteering in your community. I've been doing charity bike rides for 13 years for AIDS and breast cancer and men's cancers and homeless youth, and I can tell you, I've done volunteering at any of those events with doctors and lawyers and CEOs of huge companies, and when you're there volunteering with people, you're all at the same level, just doing good, and they see that. And there's not a lot better way to network with people than through volunteering.
I just want to say I'm the president of the bike club right now, so I should talk to you after we're done here. Networking. Look at that.
Also, I think you should not be afraid to email old bosses about your like what's up now. I happen to be friends with a boss of mine from 2 summers ago, and then now friends with my boss from the Star Tribune. And I know that not everybody is, that lucky to actually be friends with their boss, but you can send emails saying, "Hey, I just got this great internship." I mean, you don't just have that be the subject line and that's it, but you're like, "Hi, how are you doing?" "I'm doing well. I actually just started this thing and it's really cool." And people like to hear that. They like to hear that you're doing well.
And then as far as like converting it into like not an offer, but you can also let them know too once you've graduated or once you start the job search that you're starting to look and maybe you'd like some help. And kind of going back to the whole two-way street thing, you kind of want to be able to make sure that they're getting something out of it too. A lot of times people just like to help other people, and that's going to be enough for them. But I would say just, let them know that, hey, I'm starting to look for a job. Do you have any advice for me? Do you have anyone you think that I should talk to? Things like that. Someone that I talked to, actually, the first time I emailed him asking, just like, hey, can I, buy you a coffee and ask you what you do, kind of a thing. He said, sure, send me your resume. We have a bunch of openings here. I'll just submit it. And I did that, and that's the job I ended up accepting. So.
I would say go get coffee with people. And I have sent numerous emails being, hey, I'm really interested in maybe working where you, in the field that you work in. Do you think we would be able to talk, meet up for coffee? And I've, done this for very, very busy people, county attorneys, public defenders, judges, and I've never been turned down. They all are like, oh, I'd love to get coffee. And a lot of these people are someone that I've had a connection with somewhere, whether it was a professor, an adjunct professor, a mentor, and then you just sort of reconnect later. Like I hadn't had them for a couple of years, but you reach out, you say, hey, I'm interested, get coffee. And every single one of them gave me more names. And they are usually more than willing to, pass your name along to someone even higher up, where they're like, oh, well, I'll, introduce you to the chief public defender so you can get coffee with her. So it's scary. I know I've never liked sending emails to people, and I always felt bad, like I was taking up so much of their valuable time, but I've never been turned down, and they always seem really excited to do it. So I would just go ahead and do it.
You're a music business major, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the ways that you network as an academic, and Anna can address this a little bit too if she wants, is that you go to places where academics gather. And so I was thinking, if you were a music business major, you probably want to go to a lot of places where they're playing music. And not just that, I know John Keston, for example, on our faculty, spends time at I don't know if you call them conventions exactly, or meetings where they talk about technology, or they talk about composing, or they talk about things like that. That's always a great place to run into people that you may have not seen for a while, or to meet new people and get to know them. And you can probably talk about that a little bit in the academic world too.
Yeah, I think you should never count anybody out too. And so you said it doesn't always need to be the boss, but I think it's important to remember that people move around. And so at one point you might feel like, oh, that was a wasted time, or I wasted their time. But then maybe next year they're hopping over to a new role and a different place, and they're like, oh yeah. And so always touch back, and care about what they're doing, and really be a good listener to what they are doing. I think so often we think it's this one-sided thing. And so if you just be like, hey, tell me about your job, and then this active listening is so powerful. And so also when you're working with people, care about them. And then they care about you back. So you mentioned relationships. I just can't I have to reiterate that, because that's what makes this whole world go round.
And especially because when you want to move up, then that person writes your recommendation, or maybe has some inside information that they can give you. I mean, it sounds kind of crass in a way, but really it's not. It's just how relationships work. Another question here. Thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Right now, like journalism and communications overall is like making this transition to like digital based and like technology, and like there's this constant like updating everything. What advice would you give to like keep up with that and like I don't know, like deal with the uncertainty of like digital advancement, or I don't know, but like
Well, it's a big question, is because um, when I entered the business, we were writing on typewriters, and that's how old I am. Dinosaurs ruled the earth, and we were writing on typewriters. And um, the idea now that you can write something on your cell phone and transmit it from any place in the world is so mind-boggling to me in some ways. But if I may just kind of get the ball rolling, being a good writer, for example, is still being a good writer. It doesn't matter if those words are electrons or if they're ink on paper. And practicing and taking your writing seriously is going to be one thing, and I'm sure that our panelists can suggest other skills that, or public speaking, for example. I mean, that's something you can do in front of a camera, you can do in front of a courtroom. Those would be things that you'd really want to get good at, because technology in the future, you may be able to think something and it goes on the air. You have a chip in your head or something like that. Who knows? But what you're thinking has still got to be the right words, and it's got to be intelligent.
So I'm on the advertising side of things, but my job is very digital focused too. And so going into it, like I didn't know really anything about it. So I would say just read. Just read anything and everything that you can about all sorts of different subjects, different trends. Just try to familiarize yourself with it. That might be able to help you, if not get ahead of the curve, then at least be on the edge, I guess.
And of course, it's never been easier to read because it's all out there. You just need to get your Kindle and away you go. So
I think it's good practice to be comfortable with knowing that you don't know everything, and know that you can learn. And I know that sounds cliche in an interview to say, but it's true that you can graduate today and something new will come out tomorrow that you have to learn about, and just become comfortable with the discomfort of what that feels like.
And that actually was an interview question for me. Because my job involves a lot of it's legal editing, like legal news. So it's quite different from what I was doing at the Star Tribune. And one of their questions was, what do you do when you don't understand, a legal term? And I tried to not be sassy, but I was like, well, I just learn it. I mean, like, what else do you do when you don't know something? But yeah, like you can, with the internet available to you, you can really teach yourself anything. So you just have to be humble enough to say, like, you know what, I don't know what a summary judgment is, and so I'm going to look it up.
That's why I think it really does go back to having good relationship skills and, like I said, the listening, nonverbals, and honestly being detached from your own personal device when you are and being present with other people so that then when you go to your device, it's a tool, but that you're connecting with the people that you're actually with because there's nothing more frustrating and annoying to anybody in the room than somebody acting like they don't care.
I know a couple of you briefly touched on this, but how have you seen like other degrees that you've gotten aiding you in your professional careers?
Are you talking about a different other majors or
Yeah, like
okay?
majors or minors or certifications.
So I was a double major with English, and I picked that up later on after I was certain that I wanted to go to law school. So I think that's the nice thing about St. Thomas. They do give you some flexibility where you do have time later on to pick up maybe a minor or a major. So always keep that in mind. And the English major obviously really helped me in law school, just the amount of reading that you have to do for the English major and in law school and analyzing text and what someone's trying to say, reading between the lines, all of that's very applicable. And then obviously just the amount of writing that I did as well. I feel like writing is very important, especially in the legal field. And the English major obviously helps me with that a lot. Very different style of writing in law school, so that was kind of a change. But I think just knowing like the basics and how to be concise, how to back up what you're saying with facts, I learned that from an English major. So
Somebody else here?
I had an English major as well. And I'm so glad I'm working on a proposal with someone who was a bio major. No offense, bio majors. But I couldn't believe that she was like, well, it's done. And I was like, that is not done. Oh my gosh, that is horrible. She's like, it's complete sentences. I was like, ah. So writing is huge and being able to critically think. And I think that's the beauty of a liberal arts college is that no matter what your major is, they are deciding that you're going to learn how to critically think. And even those Theo classes and philosophy classes, I wish I'd taken more of them because I think that I can come at things with a lens that others might not even. Even in like a parenting education class, I feel like those skills of reading a text come through with other parents. And just, I have 4 kids too. How funny! We're both old and have a lot of children.
One thing I would say is don't put something down because you like it. You know, if you can find things that you enjoy and things that you like, that's going to be valuable for you just because it'll drive you deeper into a subject and you'll learn how to get into a subject and how to really immerse yourself in it. If you're taking only things that you think are like the spinach part of it, you know, of course I like spinach, but only the unpalatable things that you think you've got to have, then you're not going to enjoy those things, and you're not going to get into them very deeply. You're going to think, well, I've done that, now I'm ready to go. But find things you enjoy doing. That's important too. Another question here.
Yeah, hi. What is it like to interview for a communications job, and what is the hardest interview question you've ever been asked?
My first interview was literally, I kid you not, 7 hours long. It was crazy. I did a written test. I did like a performance test. I did like a literally like 3-hour long sit down like conversation with the guy. That was something I wasn't really anticipating. But yeah, so I guess just be like prepared for anything as far as that goes. The hardest question, I have to think about that part of your question, but immediately I was like, oh my gosh, the 7-hour interview. And then I had an interview once that was literally 5 minutes long. So not that it went bad or anything, but you know, sometimes it just varies about the person interviewing you, I suppose. I don't know if anyone else says that.
One thing I found out is once you kind of establish yourself and you've worked a few places, it's not really that important. You know, after I worked in Chicago, then I came here. they hired me at the Pioneer Press without an interview at all. Just had to, other than the drug test, of course, you had to get the area to have a drug test. But so once you establish yourself, it's quite a bit easier. But expect tryouts, and if you are offered a tryout, ask them for advice before the tryout starts. And when I tried out at the Chicago Tribune, I asked the assistant sports editor on the sports desk, what should I look out for? And he gave me some great advice. One thing he said is that if you don't ask questions, you're not getting the job. If you come in here and you're going to prove how macho you are and you're going to be the Lone Ranger, you're not going to make it. That was terrific advice and got me the job, really, because I wanted to be macho and be the Lone Ranger. So don't be afraid to ask before you have the tryout, what do I need to do to get ready for it? Another thing they told me is read the style book, so that was helpful.
Something that was kind of hard for me in my interview for my job was they asked about like some software that I'd never heard of before and some terms that I just didn't know. And so part of you kind of wants to be like, oh yeah, I know what that is, But I mean, honesty is the best policy. So just being transparent, being just saying, I don't know what that is, but also then say something like, I'm curious to learn more, or like a way that you would overcome that, like maybe I'd go look it up or something, like if I ran into this on the job, this is how I would problem solve or troubleshoot.
I would say that authenticity is very important, and especially if you're going into some job where you're going to be talking to people, presenting, or something like that. That's what they're looking for at the interview. I was always told before going into legal interviews that they're like checking to see if they can picture you giving a closing argument in front of a jury and keeping their attention. So even though you're answering, maybe mundane, boring questions, that's what they're actually trying to figure out. And so I think it's just important to come with a lot of energy. And I also think people can tell if you don't want the job. So really think like long and hard about why you want a job and come with that enthusiasm, because that shines through. And I was actually in an interview once, and it was in the middle of the interview when I realized I don't want to do this. Like the question, I was like, no, what am I doing here? And like they could tell it was a really great interview. We got along really well, but I think they could tell too that that wasn't where I was supposed to be. So if you do come in with enthusiasm, I think that goes a long ways.
I think I thought of the hardest question I ever got, and it was, what is taconite? And which is like, I'm from Duluth, close to the Iron Range and everything, so I should know a little bit about like what that is. But it was something I was like so caught off guard for, and like what they were trying to figure out is like how much of a connection I have to the community, how much research I had done about the area that I'm going to be working in. So that's something to think about too, is really getting to know all the ins and outs of, like if you were going to do broadcast journalism, for instance, the area that you want to cover, or if it's just an ad agency or PR or whatever, just everything that they do. Really important to make yourself familiar with their work.
And I also think, oh, that's really loud. I also think you could talk to people who, in the profession that you want, asking about what their interviews are like, because my interviews, they're very editing based. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to be an editor, but if you don't, you're just like, cool, I don't actually care. But like for me, they ask AP style questions. I was asked for this job, what's the difference between that and which, and like why do you use one over the other? Or you have writing tests if you want to write, or I had editing tests. So just it all depends. But I think asking somebody who's recently in a job that you might want what their interview was like, that would be super helpful.
Well, I think we've run out of time, and I want you to give it up for our panelists one last time. And I hope you got some nugget of truth out of this evening. If you were in my class, 111 class, there's a sign-up sheet out there that you can let me know that you were here. And there might be, I don't know if anybody else has one out there or not, but thank you for coming in, and have a good evening the rest of the evening.